Miami, Florida, May 11th, 1981, 11:45 a.m. Bob Marley is dying, the legend who made the world stop and listen, who turned music into prophecy, who became the voice of millions. Bob Marley lies in a hospital bed at Cedars of Lebanon, his body reduced to barely 90 pounds. The room is drenched in white light, sterile, unforgiving, mechanical. Outside, palm trees sway in the Caribbean breeze, indifferent to the slow death unfolding inside. His dreadlocks, once wild and defiant, cascade across the pillow like ropes of prayer, tangled and heavy. His skin, once glowing bronze under Jamaican sun, has turned ashen, translucent. The cancer has eaten through him like fire through dry brush, starting in a single toe, spreading through his lungs, his liver, his brain. And now, at 36 years old, the man who told the world that every little thing is gonna be all right is taking his final breaths. Bob Marley's eyes flutter open. His mother, Cedella, clutches his hand. His wife, Rita, stands nearby, silent, devastated. His children, some of the 11 he fathered with various women, wait in the hallway, unable to comprehend that the prophet of love is mortal after all. Outside the hospital, fans have begun to gather, holding candles, weeping, singing "No Woman, No Cry" in fractured harmony. Inside, the heart monitor beeps slower, slower. The rhythm of reggae fading into silence. His last words, whispered to his son Ziggy, are simple and crushing. Money can't buy life. And with that, the rhythm stopped. The prophet of love fell silent. But how does a legend die so young? How does a man capable of healing the world with music fail to heal himself? Was it faith, fate, or something darker lurking in the shadows of fame? The official story says cancer. The medical records confirm it. But those who knew Bob Marley, really knew him, whisper other truths. They speak of exhaustion, of spiritual warfare, of a man who burned too brightly, gave too much, loved too recklessly. They speak of the assassination attempt in 1976, 2 days before the Smile Jamaica concert, when 7 gunmen stormed his home and sprayed bullets into the night. Bob was hit. Rita was hit. His manager was hit. Yet 2 days later, Bob Marley walked onto that stage, bandaged and bleeding, and performed for 90 minutes. When asked why, he said, "The people who are trying to make this world worse aren't taking a day off. How can I?" That was Bob Marley, a man who couldn't stop, wouldn't stop, even when his body screamed for rest, even when death came knocking. But was his death truly as simple as melanoma? Or was there something more sinister woven into the fabric of his final years? Political enemies, CIA conspiracies, the weight of being a global symbol in an era of violent upheaval. The questions linger like smoke. And to understand how it all ended, we must first understand how it all began. On February 6, 1945, in the hills of 9 Mile, Jamaica, a child was born who would one day make the world stop and listen. He was born unwanted, mixed blood, poor. His mother, Cedella Malcolm, was 18, black and beautiful. His father, Norval Sinclair Marley, was a 50-year-old white British naval officer who rarely visited, rarely acknowledged his son, and died when Bob was only 10. They called him Yellow Boy. They mocked his light skin and soft curls. He belonged to neither the white world nor fully to the black one. Invisibility became his first teacher. But invisibility has a strange power. It makes you watch, it makes you listen, it makes you hungry. 9 Mile was red dirt and endless green hills, poverty like religion, goats and songs to pass the time. And it was here that Bob Marley first discovered the thing that would save him: music. Even as a toddler, he would sit for hours listening to the radio, absorbing every note, every rhythm. He didn't just hear music, he felt it in his bones. And when he sang, even as a child, people stopped. There was something ancient in his voice, something that didn't belong to a boy from the hills. It belonged to the earth itself. His childhood was marked by absence. Norval Marley was a ghost, a white man who impregnated a black teenage girl and then vanished into the colonial machinery of Jamaica. The few times he appeared, it was with promises he never kept. Bob learned early that fathers could be myths, that love could be conditional, that the color of your skin could determine whether you belonged anywhere at all. The other children taunted him. Half-caste, neither fish nor fowl. He fought back sometimes, but more often he retreated into silence, into observation, into the world inside his head where music played constantly. Cedella tried her best. She was a strong woman, a survivor, but she was also alone. She worked as a seamstress, as a maid, as anything that would put food on the table. Young Bob would watch her hands, always moving, always creating, always fighting against the crushing weight of poverty. He learned from her that survival was an art form, that dignity could exist even in deprivation, that music, laughter, and faith were weapons against despair. By the time he was a teenager, Bob had moved to Trenchtown, Kingston, the most violent ghetto in Jamaica. The transition from rural stillness to urban chaos was brutal. Trenchtown was a concrete jungle where gangs ruled, where hunger was constant, where survival meant learning to fight or learning to fade. Bob did neither. Instead, he learned to create. Trenchtown was more than poverty. It was a crucible. Zinc roofs rusted in the rain. Sewage ran through the yards. Children grew old by 10. But in that suffocating heat, something miraculous happened. Music became revolution. Ska pounded from shacks, rocksteady echoed in the alleys, and young men like Bob Marley, Neville Bunny Livingston, and Peter Tosh gathered in the yard, harmonizing, dreaming, believing that sound could be their exodus. In Trenchtown, Bob met more than musicians. He met Marcus Garvey's philosophy. He met the Bible as prophecy. He met the idea that black people were not cursed, they were chosen, exiled from Zion, destined to return. He didn't just read these ideas, he swallowed them whole. They became his marrow. By the early 1960s, Bob was writing songs that didn't sound like anything else in Jamaica. Not just about love or dancing, about suffering, resistance, survival. He read obsessively. He didn't drink. He didn't chase money. His friends thought he was intense. His enemies thought he was crazy. But Bob knew something they didn't. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was prophecy. Could his early childhood experiences, being abandoned by his father, mocked for his mixed race, trapped in poverty, have laid the foundation for the prophet he would become? Or was there always something divine inside him waiting to be unleashed? By 1963, Bob Marley, Bunny Wailer, and Peter Tosh had formed the Wailers. They were 18 years old, unknown and desperate. Their first single, Simmer Down, became a hit in Jamaica, a ska anthem about youth violence and survival. For a brief moment, they tasted success, but success in Jamaica meant nothing beyond the island. The world didn't care about three boys from Trenchtown. The Wailers struggled. Record labels exploited them. Producers stole their royalties. They recorded dozens of songs and earned almost nothing. Bob worked in a welding factory to survive. He married Rita Anderson in 1966, not out of wealth or stability, but out of love and faith. Then, in a desperate bid for opportunity, he moved to Delaware, USA, to work in a Chrysler factory alongside his mother. Imagine that. The future voice of revolution, standing on an assembly line, installing car parts, dreaming of music while his hands bled from factory work. He hated it. He lasted 8 months. But those months in America taught him something crucial. The system was designed to break you, to turn human beings into machines, to crush dreams under the weight of capitalism. He returned to Jamaica in 1967 more determined than ever. This time he wouldn't compromise. This time he would make music on his own terms. The years of struggle were brutal. Bob and the Wailers recorded constantly but earned almost nothing. They lived hand to mouth, surviving on whatever gigs they could find. Bob's relationship with Rita became strained as bills piled up and children were born. But through it all, Bob never stopped writing, never stopped believing. He carried notebooks everywhere, scribbling lyrics on scraps of paper, humming melodies while walking through the streets of Kingston. His bandmates thought he was possessed. Maybe he was. It was during this period that Bob Marley encountered Rastafari. Not as a casual philosophy, but as a complete spiritual awakening. It wasn't just a religion. It was a rebellion disguised as faith. Rastafari taught him that Haile Selassie I, the Emperor of Ethiopia, was the living God. It taught him that black people were the chosen people, exiled from Zion, destined to return to Africa. It taught him that Babylon, the corrupt Western world, must fall. And it taught him that ganja, dreadlocks, and righteous living were sacred. Bob didn't just adopt Rastafari. He became it. He stopped cutting his hair. He stopped eating meat. He meditated. He prayed. He began writing songs that weren't just catchy, they were sermons. Get Up, Stand Up, Exodus, Redemption Song. These weren't pop hits. They were calls to revolution. But revolution doesn't pay the bills. The Wailers were still broke, still struggling, still unknown outside Jamaica. That is until 1972 when they met Chris Blackwell, a white Jamaican producer who saw something the world had missed. Blackwell signed them to Island Records and gave them something radical: creative control. He believed in Bob's vision. He believed that reggae could be more than a niche genre for Caribbean audiences. He believed it could change the world. In 1973, the Wailers released Catch a Fire. It flopped commercially, but critically it was a revelation. The world had never heard reggae like this. Raw, spiritual, political, dangerous. Bob Marley wasn't just making music, he was making history. The follow-up, Burnin', featured I Shot the Sheriff, a song so powerful that even Eric Clapton covered it and took it to #1. Suddenly, Bob Marley wasn't just a Jamaican artist, he was a global phenomenon. But success came with a price. Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer left the group, frustrated by Blackwell's focus on Bob as the frontman. The collective became a monarchy, and Bob, whether he wanted it or not, became a king. The brotherhood that had sustained them through years of poverty and struggle was fractured. Peter felt sidelined. Bunny refused to tour internationally. The three men who had dreamed together in the yards of Trenchtown were now on separate paths. Was the success they achieved truly worth all the pain they endured? Or had they traded brotherhood for fame, only to discover that fame is the loneliest stage of all? By 1976, Bob Marley was no longer just a musician. He was a movement. Rastaman Vibration had cracked the US top 10. He was selling out arenas in Europe. He was being hailed as the voice of the oppressed, the Third World's John Lennon, the prophet of a new kind of revolution, one fought not with guns but with guitars. On stage, he was electric. His body moved like liquid fire, his dreadlocks whipping through the air like serpents. The rhythm poured through him, ancient, unbroken, holy. He didn't just perform, he channeled something beyond himself. Crowds didn't just listen. They worshipped. From Kingston to London, from Tokyo to Nairobi, people sang his songs like hymns. One Love, No Woman, No Cry, Exodus. These weren't just hits. They were anthems of survival. His concerts became spiritual experiences. People would arrive hours early, smoking ganja, discussing Rastafari, preparing themselves for what felt less like a show and more like a religious gathering. When Bob walked onto the stage, the energy would shift. The air would crackle. He would stand there for a moment, dreadlocks framing his face like a lion's mane, and then the first chord would strike. The crowd would erupt. And for the next 2 hours, there was only rhythm, only truth, only liberation. Bob had a gift for reading a crowd, for sensing what they needed. Sometimes he would slow things down, sitting on a stool with just his guitar, singing Redemption Song or No Woman, No Cry, in a voice so tender it could break your heart. Other times he would ignite the stage with Get Up, Stand Up, his body twisting and leaping, his voice rising to a righteous roar. He didn't just sing lyrics, he inhabited them. Every word was a prayer, every note was a weapon. But behind the halo of fame, Bob Marley was drowning. He barely slept. He smoked constantly. He toured relentlessly. And while the world saw a prophet of peace, those close to him saw a man buckling under impossible pressure. He had 11 children with 7 different women. His marriage to Rita was strained, fractured by infidelity and absence. He loved deeply, recklessly, but love for Bob was never simple. It was a fire that consumed as much as it illuminated. The women in Bob's life tell a complicated story. There was Rita, his wife, who stood by him through poverty and fame, who raised his children, who survived an assassination attempt for him. But Bob was not faithful. He fathered children with Anita Belnavis, Pat Williams, Janet Hunt, Cindy Breakspear, Miss World 1976, and others. He loved them all, in his own way. But he could not be contained, could not be domesticated. His bandmates joked that Bob had a woman in every city, but it wasn't a joke, it was a pattern, a hunger that fame only amplified. Was it insecurity? A deep wound from being abandoned by his own father? Or was it simply the intoxication of power, the knowledge that he could have anyone, anywhere, at any time? Bob never spoke openly about it, but those who knew him saw the guilt in his eyes, saw the way he would disappear into meditation, into prayer, trying to reconcile his spiritual beliefs with his human desires. His Rastafari faith demanded purity, yet his life was chaos. He preached unity, yet his own band was fracturing. He sang about freedom, yet he was trapped in a machine, record labels, managers, tour schedules, expectations. The more famous he became, the more isolated he felt. In interviews, he smiled. He spoke of Jah, of love, of redemption. But his eyes told a different story. Behind all that glamour, was there an unbearable loneliness that nobody saw? Was the man who healed millions secretly dying inside? His closest friends noticed the changes. Bob became more withdrawn, more paranoid. He would stay up all night, smoking ganja, reading the Bible, writing lyrics that grew darker, more prophetic. He spoke often of death, of Babylon, of the coming judgment. He knew that what he was doing, challenging systems of power, preaching black liberation, uniting the oppressed, made him dangerous. He knew that prophets don't die peacefully in their beds. And then came December 3rd, 1976. The night that changed everything. Bob Marley had agreed to perform at the Smile Jamaica concert, a free event meant to ease political tensions in a country on the brink of civil war. Jamaica was split between rival gangs aligned with opposing political parties. Violence was everywhere. Bob, ever the peacemaker, believed music could bridge the divide, but someone didn't want peace. 2 days before the concert, 7 armed men stormed Bob's home at 56 Hope Road. It was 9 p.m. Rehearsal had just ended. Bob, Rita, and his manager Don Taylor were inside. The gunmen didn't knock. They didn't negotiate. They opened fire. Bullets tore through the walls. Rita was shot in the head. Don Taylor was hit 5 times. Bob took a bullet to the chest and another grazed his arm. Somehow, miraculously, no one died. The gunmen fled into the night, vanishing like ghosts. The official story? A robbery gone wrong. But those who knew the truth whispered darker theories. Political assassination, CIA involvement, a message from Babylon. Bob never spoke publicly about who he thought was behind it. But 2 days later, bandaged and bleeding, he walked onto that stage and performed for 90 minutes. When asked why, he said, "The people trying to make this world worse aren't taking a day off. How can I?" And for one brief night, the world believed love could win. That moment, Bob Marley, wounded and defiant, singing for peace while his enemies lurked in the shadows, became legend. But it also marked the beginning of the end. The assassination attempt shattered something inside him. He could no longer pretend that music was safe. He could no longer believe that love alone could protect him. The bullets had missed his vital organs, but they had hit something deeper. His faith in humanity. His belief that art could transcend politics. His hope that Jamaica could be saved. After that night, Bob was never the same. His eyes grew harder. His smile came less easily. He carried the weight of near death everywhere he went. Did this tragic event mark his downfall? Or was it simply the tipping point of deeper problems already festering beneath the surface? After the assassination attempt, Bob Marley fled Jamaica. He spent 2 years in exile, mostly in London, recording some of his greatest work. Exodus, Kaya, albums that would define a generation. But exile is a kind of death. And Bob, the prophet of Jamaica, was a man without a country. He became quieter, more introspective. The rhythm inside him changed, slower, heavier, more deliberate. He wrote Redemption Song. Just him and a guitar, no drums, no bass, no production. The lyrics were stark, haunting, prophetic. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. It was a song about liberation. But it was also a farewell. In London, Bob lived like a king in exile. He rented a house in Chelsea, surrounded himself with fellow Rastas, and continued to work obsessively. But the exile gnawed at him. Jamaica was his home, his inspiration, his heartbeat. Without it, he felt disconnected, untethered. He would sit for hours, staring out at the gray London sky, smoking ganja, missing the red dirt of 9 Mile, the zinc roofs of Trenchtown, the vibrant chaos of Kingston. During this period, Bob's spiritual practice deepened. He meditated for hours each day. He read the Bible cover to cover, searching for hidden meanings, for prophecies about his own life. He became convinced that he was living out a divine plan. That his music was not his own, but a gift from Jah, meant to awaken the world. He spoke often of Ethiopia, of Zion, of the promised land where black people would finally be free. He dreamed of returning to Africa, of building a community there, of living out his final days in the land of his spiritual ancestors. But his body had other plans, because by 1977, Bob Marley was sick. It started with a soccer injury. A nail in his boot cut into his right big toe during a game in Paris. The wound wouldn't heal. It festered. Doctors examined it and found something terrifying. Acral lentiginous melanoma, an aggressive form of skin cancer. They recommended immediate amputation, but Bob refused. Rastafari teaches that the body is a temple. To cut off a part of the body is to defile that temple. Bob believed that Jah, God, would heal him. He believed that faith was stronger than medicine. So instead of amputation, he had the nail bed removed and continued touring. It was a decision that would kill him. The cancer spread. It moved like Babylon itself, silent, relentless, conquering from within. By 1980, it had metastasized to his lungs, liver, and brain. He was dying, and he knew it. But he kept performing. He launched the Uprising Tour, done 40 shows across Europe and America. He played through the pain. He smiled through the nausea. The rhythm still poured through him even as his body betrayed him. Those who saw him during the Uprising Tour noticed the changes. Bob had lost weight. His movements on stage were slower, more deliberate. His eyes had a distant quality, as if he were already seeing beyond this world. But his voice was still powerful, still prophetic. When he sang Redemption Song, audiences wept. When he sang Could You Be Loved, they danced. But there was an undercurrent of farewell in every performance. A sense that this was the last time, the final tour, the closing chapter. On September 23, 1980, Bob Marley collapsed on stage in Pittsburgh. The rhythm finally broke. He couldn't continue. The tour was canceled. He sought treatment in Germany under controversial holistic therapies, but it was too late. The cancer had won. In May 1981, knowing the end was near, Bob Marley boarded a plane to Jamaica. He wanted to die at home, but his body couldn't make it. The plane had to emergency land in Miami. He was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, and there, on May 11, 1981, surrounded by family, Bob Marley died. His final words, "Money can't buy life. Can anyone ever truly escape from the shadow of their darkest moments? Or do we all carry our wounds until the very end?" After his death, the world mourned. In Jamaica, Bob Marley was given a state funeral, an honor reserved for heads of state. Over 100,000 people lined the streets of Kingston. His body was displayed in the national arena. Dignitaries, musicians, and ordinary Jamaicans wept openly. The Prime Minister delivered a eulogy. Rastafarians chanted prayers. Musicians played his songs. The entire nation stopped. For one day there was no violence, no political division, only grief, only love, only the shared recognition that something irreplaceable had been lost. He was buried in 9 Mile, the village where he was born, with his guitar, a Bible, and a stalk of ganja. The funeral procession was a pilgrimage. Thousands walked for miles following the hearse through the hills, singing One Love and Exodus. When they lowered his body into the ground, the sky opened up and rain poured down, as if the earth itself was weeping. But even in death, Bob Marley was not at peace. Conspiracy theories swirled. Some claimed the CIA had infected him with cancer as punishment for his anti-imperialist views. Others pointed to the 1976 assassination attempt, suggesting the cancer was a delayed result of the shooting. Still others whispered that rival political factions in Jamaica had orchestrated his death. The most persistent theory involves a pair of boots. According to some accounts, after the assassination attempt, Bob received a gift from a journalist connected to the CIA, a pair of soccer boots. Inside one of the boots was allegedly a copper wire or infected nail that punctured his toe during a soccer game in Paris. The wound became the entry point for the melanoma that would eventually kill him. While there is no concrete evidence to support this theory, many of Bob's closest friends and family members believe it. They point to the strange timing, the aggressive nature of the cancer, and Bob's status as a political threat to Western interests in Jamaica and across the Third World. Others suggest that the Jamaican political establishment, fearful of Bob's influence and his ability to unite opposing factions, may have played a role in his demise. Bob had become more than a musician. He was a political force who could sway elections and mobilize masses. In a country torn apart by political violence, where politicians armed gangs and manipulated the poor, Bob Marley's message of unity and resistance threatened the status quo. Did someone decide that he was too dangerous to live? There is no evidence for any of this. The medical records are clear. Bob Marley died of melanoma because he refused treatment. But the fact that people still ask these questions, still search for villains in the shadows, reveals something deeper. It reveals that Bob Marley was more than a man. He was a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. Symbols get killed. Was his death as straightforward as reported, or were powerful hidden forces involved? We may never know, but what we do know is this. Bob Marley's death was not just the loss of a musician. It was the martyrdom of a prophet. In the years since his passing, Bob Marley has become immortal. His face is painted on walls from Kingston to Addis Ababa. His music plays in cafes, protests, and temples. One Love has been streamed billions of times. His estate is worth over $130 million. He has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2024, Jamaica officially declared Bob Marley Day. But more than the accolades, more than the money, Bob Marley left behind something greater. A vision. A vision of a world where love conquers hate, where music heals wounds, where the oppressed rise up and sing. He showed us that a boy from 9 Mile, fatherless, poor, mocked, could become the voice of a generation. He taught us that revolution doesn't require violence. It requires rhythm. His influence is everywhere. You can hear him in hip-hop, in rock, in pop, in every genre that dares to speak truth to power. Artists from Lauryn Hill to Damian Marley to Protégé carry his torch. Activists around the world march to his songs. Get Up, Stand Up has become an anthem for protesters from Hong Kong to Ferguson. Redemption Song is sung in churches, in schools, in prisons, anywhere people seek liberation. But Bob Marley's legacy is complicated. His estate has been embroiled in legal battles for decades. His children, some legitimate, some not, have fought over his fortune. His image has been commercialized, slapped on t-shirts and posters and rolling papers, often divorced from the revolutionary message he preached. He has become a brand as much as a prophet. And there's something tragic about that. Something that would have broken his heart. Yet his life also teaches us something darker. It teaches us that even prophets are human. That even those who preach love can be flawed, unfaithful, broken. That even those who heal the world cannot always heal themselves. He preached redemption but died needing his own. Bob Marley loved too many women. He fathered too many children. He ignored his body's warnings until it was too late. He believed in faith over medicine, and that belief killed him. He was not perfect. He was not a saint. He was a man, brilliant, complicated, deeply wounded. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not the myth of the perfect prophet, but the truth of the imperfect human who tried anyway, who sang anyway, who loved anyway, who stood on that stage in 1976, bleeding and defiant, and refused to let fear win. Today, over 40 years after his death, Bob Marley's voice still echoes. It echoes in every protest song, every call for justice, every moment when music reminds us that we are not alone. His dreadlocks have become a symbol of resistance. His lyrics have become scripture. His image hangs in homes and hearts across the world like an icon of hope. But beneath that icon is a man who suffered, who bled, who died too young, too painfully, too alone. A man who could fill stadiums but couldn't fill the void inside. A man who could make the world dance but couldn't outrun his own death. And so we are left with the question, what does it mean to be a prophet? Is it to have all the answers? Or is it to ask the right questions? Is it to be perfect? Or is it to be human enough to show us that even in brokenness there is beauty? Bob Marley once said, "The truth is everyone is going to hurt you. You just got to find the ones worth suffering for." He spent his life suffering for us, for the world, for the music, for the message. And in the end, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. Tell me, when you hear Redemption Song, do you hear just a song? Or do you hear the voice of a man who knew he was dying and chose to sing anyway? Do you hear entertainment? Or do you hear prophecy? Bob Marley didn't just make music, he made meaning. And meaning, unlike flesh, never dies. So the question remains, if Bob Marley had chosen medicine over faith, would he still be Bob Marley? Or does every prophet die proving his own message? We'll never know. But we have the songs. We have the legacy. We have the memory of a man who burned too brightly, loved too recklessly, and left too soon. And maybe in a world still struggling for freedom, still crying out for justice, still searching for love. That's exactly the prophet we need. Not the one who lived forever, but the one who showed us how to live while we're here.